The Fourth Shinobi World War is over, but the price was too high. The loss, the pain, the destruction. But what if fate itself gave them a second chance? Naruto and Sasuke open their eyes, only to realize they are back in their 6-year-old genin bodies. But with all their memories, battle experience, and the power of the Sage of Six Paths, Naruto woke to the sound of rain tapping against a cracked window. And for one breath, he expected the broken stone of the Valley of the End beneath his back. Instead, he saw a stained ceiling, a cold room, and a child's hand trembling on his blanket. His fingers were small, soft, and unscarred. The missing arm he remembered from the final battle was there, thin and weak, curled against his chest. His throat tightened as he touched his own face and found whisker marks under wet eyes. The apartment smelled of old milk, dust, and loneliness. A bowl of instant ramen sat near the sink, swollen and forgotten. Naruto slid from the bed too quickly, stumbled on short legs, and hit the wooden floor with a dull thud. Pain burst through his knees, ordinary and humiliating. He stared at the floorboards until the room stopped spinning. The body that had fought gods could barely stand without shaking, and that truth landed heavier than any enemy's fist. A calendar hung crooked beside the door. Naruto crawled toward it, fingers dragging through dust, and stared until the numbers made sense. The year was wrong. The village was whole. He was 6 years old again. Memories crashed through him like poisoned water. Madara's shadow, Obito's mask, Neji falling, Jiraiya sinking into darkness, Sasuke screaming beneath storm clouds. Naruto clutched his head until his nails marked his scalp. Inside him, behind iron bars he had once shattered with trust, something ancient shifted. Kurama's chakra rolled like heat under the skin of his stomach. The seal burned faintly, a red pulse beneath a child's loose shirt. Naruto closed his eyes and sank inward. The familiar sewer opened around him, colder and darker than he remembered. Water lapped against his bare feet, and the great cage towered ahead, its bars slick with shadow. Kurama's eyes opened in the dark, vast and furious. The fox looked at him with old hatred, yet a strange flicker moved through that gaze, like a flame remembering warmth from a dream it had never lived. Naruto raised one shaking hand to the bars. His voice came out small, but his posture belonged to someone who had stood before monsters. He told Kurama that he remembered him, and the fox's claws scraped stone hard enough to send water rippling. Kurama answered with a growl that shook the sewer roof. He accused Naruto of playing tricks with the seal, of stealing memories, of wearing a child's face over a liar's soul. The words were rage, but the silence after them trembled. Naruto pressed his palm to the cold metal. He did not ask for power. He asked Kurama to watch, because the world outside was about to bleed again, and this time, Naruto intended to reach the wound before it opened. The cage faded. Naruto woke on his apartment floor with fever on his skin and red chakra smoking faintly from his fingertips. He tried to stand again, but his legs gave out, and he laughed once through the pain, because he was alive. Across the village, Sasuke Uchiha opened his eyes beneath a clean blue blanket and saw sunlight crossing the ceiling of his childhood room. For several seconds he did not breathe. Somewhere outside, his mother moved through the kitchen. The smell of grilled fish came through the sliding door. It struck harder than any genjutsu. Sasuke sat up so sharply that the blanket fell from his shoulders, and his small hands clenched around fabric he had mourned for years. His room was untouched by blood. The clan symbol hung on the wall. Wooden training weapons leaned in the corner. On the desk, a half-finished school exercise waited beside a cup of ink. Sasuke stumbled into the hallway. His feet remembered silent steps, but his child's body moved too fast, too clumsy. He nearly collided with Mikoto as she turned, and the sight of her living face tore the air from his chest. Mikoto knelt, worried by his pallor, and brushed his hair away from his forehead. Sasuke froze under the gentle touch. His hands rose slowly, almost afraid she would vanish, and caught the sleeve of her apron. He did not cry loudly. His shoulders shook once, then again, while he buried his face against her. Mikoto held him without understanding, and the morning light warmed the Uchiha kitchen like the world had never ended. When Fugaku entered, stern and already dressed, Sasuke's grief hardened into control. He released his mother and wiped his face with the back of his hand. His father studied him with narrow eyes, seeing a strange stillness where childish pride should have been. Itachi stood in the doorway, behind Fugaku, silent as a blade in its sheath. Sasuke saw the brother he had loved, hated, hunted, and mourned. The kitchen blurred, and the old memory of blood over tatami flashed across the living room. Sasuke looked down before his eyes could betray him. He knew the massacre had not happened yet. That meant Shisui was still alive. Danzo still held his secret claws, and Itachi was already standing at the edge of a choice that would destroy him. At the academy, children shouted beneath a bright sky, while Naruto stood near the fence, small hands buried in his pockets. He watched younger versions of his classmates chase each other across the yard, their faces untouched by war. Kiba laughed too loudly near the training posts. Shikamaru lay in the shade, already bored by the world. Hinata watched from a distance, fingers pressed together, her pale eyes turning away whenever Naruto glanced in her direction. Naruto wanted to run to them all. He wanted to tell them who would live, who would die, who would carry grief like a second shadow. Instead, he bit the inside of his cheek and walked toward the main building. Sasuke arrived late, surrounded by whispers from other children. His clothes were neat, his expression composed, but Naruto saw the tension in his shoulders. Their eyes met across the yard, and the noise of the academy thinned. For a moment, they were boys again. Then Naruto saw the storm hidden behind Sasuke's calm gaze, and Sasuke saw the same impossible age inside Naruto's blue eyes. Neither smiled. Both understood too much. Naruto crossed the yard with forced casualness, dragging his sandals through dust like any troublesome child. Sasuke remained near the steps, pretending indifference, while his fingers tightened around the strap of his bag. They passed each other beside the storage shed. Naruto brushed Sasuke's shoulder and murmured a question too soft for anyone else to hear, asking about the valley where they had once tried to end each other. Sasuke's breath caught. He answered without turning, naming the broken statues and the rain on their blood. Naruto's hand closed around the edge of the shed wall. The world tilted, then steadied beneath them. Behind the shed, hidden from the yard, they faced each other like enemies who had forgotten how to fight. Sasuke's eyes searched Naruto's face with desperate suspicion, while Naruto fought the urge to grab him and make sure he would not disappear. Naruto explained the moment he had awakened. The apartment, the seal, Kurama's anger. Sasuke listened with the pale focus of a survivor counting knives in the dark. When Naruto mentioned Kaguya, Sasuke's jaw tightened. Sasuke told him the year, the clan meetings, the mood inside the Uchiha district. His voice stayed level, but his fingers dug crescents into his palm when he spoke of Itachi and Shisui. A bell rang across the yard. Children began running back inside, complaining about lessons. Naruto and Sasuke remained in the shadow of the shed, surrounded by dust motes and the faint smell of old wood. Their first plan formed in fragments. They could not reveal everything. They could not overpower adults. They needed Shisui alive, Itachi warned, Hiruzen alerted, and Danzo exposed before the village chose silence over justice. Sasuke's eyes hardened when Naruto suggested caution. The old fire rose in him, aimed at Danzo, at the elders, at every shadow that had fed on his family. Naruto stepped closer, forcing Sasuke to look at the child's body they both wore. Sasuke understood the warning before Naruto finished. They were dangerous only in memory. Their hands were too small for the future they carried, and one wrong move could push Itachi faster toward the blade. The class began with Iruka scolding Naruto for being late, but the familiar anger in his teacher's voice nearly broke him. Naruto took his seat without making a joke, and the room seemed to pause at the missing disruption. Iruka watched him for a second too long. Naruto lowered his head over the worksheet, gripping the brush carefully. The letters came out cleaner than they should have, and he ruined them on purpose with a careless smear of ink. Sakura sat a few desks away, stealing glances at Sasuke. Her younger face carried the same bright certainty Naruto remembered, but her eyes shifted with confusion when Sasuke ignored every admiring whisper around him. Sasuke stared at the board and saw none of it. He counted days in his head, matching old memories against the present. Each date became a blade hanging above Shisui's neck. That afternoon, Naruto tried to create a shadow clone behind his apartment building. He shaped the chakra with perfect memory, formed the seal, and felt his tiny chakra network scream before the technique collapsed into smoke and pain. He fell against the wall, blood running from one nostril. His breath came in harsh bursts. The alley spun around him, while one pathetic clone flickered into existence, crawled 2 steps, and vanished like steam. From inside the seal, Kurama's laughter rolled through him, cruel and sharp. Naruto wiped the blood with his sleeve and pressed his forehead to the cold wall. The fox's chakra pulsed nearby, tempting as fire in winter. Naruto refused to reach for it. His hands shook as he formed the seal again, slower this time. The second attempt produced nothing but smoke and a splitting headache. He slid down the wall, teeth clenched around a groan. On the Uchiha training ground, Sasuke threw shuriken at a row of wooden targets. His adult mind knew the angles, the timing, the trick of rebounding steel. His child's wrist failed him on the 3rd throw. The shuriken struck wide and buried itself in the dirt. Sasuke stared at it, humiliated by the gap between memory and muscle. Sweat rolled down his temple, and his small lungs burned after only a short drill. He tried to force the Sharingan awake. Old terror, old rage, old blood on walls. For one instant his vision sharpened, a single tomo burning in one eye before pain stabbed through his skull. Sasuke dropped to one knee. The world blurred red, then gray. Itachi appeared at the edge of the training ground, silent and watchful, while Sasuke pressed 2 fingers against his eyelid to hide the fading mark. Itachi approached with measured steps. He asked, gently and indirectly, why Sasuke was pushing himself as if an enemy waited beyond the fence. Sasuke wanted to say Danzo's name. Instead, he lowered his gaze to the dirt. He told Itachi that he had dreamed of losing everyone. The answer sounded childish enough to survive, but the weight behind it made Itachi's expression change. For a heartbeat, the older brother looked less like a prodigy and more like a frightened son. Over the next days, Naruto and Sasuke built their war from scraps. A stolen training schedule, a remembered patrol route, a map of the Uchiha district drawn from Sasuke's childhood memory and corrected with present footsteps. They met at dawn near the river, where mist clung to the reeds and fishermen had not yet arrived. Naruto practiced chakra control by holding leaves to his palms. Sasuke drilled footwork until his ankles trembled. Sometimes they argued in low voices. Sasuke wanted direct action, a knife aimed at Danzo's throat before the old man could move. Naruto insisted that killing Danzo in secret would create another shadow for Root to worship. Sasuke hated that Naruto was right. The old path of revenge called to him with familiar heat. But every morning, he returned home and saw Mikoto pouring tea. The living faces of his clan made restraint more painful than fury. Naruto began visiting Iruka after class, under the excuse of needing help. He made small mistakes on purpose, then corrected them too quickly. Iruka noticed the pattern, and concern slowly replaced irritation in his eyes. One evening, Naruto left a folded paper beneath Iruka's lesson scrolls. It contained no prophecy, only a warning that root agents had moved near the Uchiha district, and that Shisui Uchiha was in danger from someone inside the village. Iruka found the note after sunset. The classroom was empty, the lamps dim, and the rain had begun again. He read the words twice, then looked toward Naruto's empty desk with a frown that deepened into fear. The warning reached Hiruzen through a path Naruto had chosen carefully. Iruka brought it as concern for a student's safety, avoiding accusations he could not prove. The Hokage read the note beneath pipe smoke that curled like uneasy ghosts. Hiruzen's face did not change much, but his fingers tightened around the paper. He recognized the shape of the danger even before he admitted it. Danzo had been moving pieces without permission for too long. At the Uchiha compound, Sasuke waited until Itachi returned late from duty. The hallway smelled of lamp oil and polished wood. Sasuke stood barefoot in his nightclothes, blocking the way like a small ghost with old eyes. Itachi paused. Sasuke asked him, through careful hints, whether loyalty to the village could demand the death of innocent children. The question struck too close to thoughts Itachi had hidden beneath obedience. Sasuke spoke of a crow falling with one eye stolen, of a friend forced to choose death over manipulation. He never named the future as memory. He placed each detail like a blade on the floor between them. Itachi's hand moved toward Sasuke's shoulder, then stopped. His eyes sharpened in the dim light. The name Shisui passed between them without being spoken aloud, carried by the sudden stillness in the hallway. The next day, Itachi watched Shisui with new attention. Shisui laughed beside the river as if nothing hunted him, but his gaze kept drifting toward rooftops and blind corners. Itachi saw the hidden exhaustion beneath his friend's easy smile. Sasuke trailed them badly and knew it. His child's legs could not keep pace with Anbu-trained shinobi. He hid behind a stone wall, breathing through his mouth, while Itachi glanced once toward his hiding place and pretended not to see him. Naruto followed another trail. He shadowed a route courier from the market district, using clumsy alleys and memory of future stealth lessons. Twice he nearly exposed himself. Once he slipped in mud and bit his tongue hard enough to taste blood. The courier entered a narrow service tunnel beneath an old storehouse. Naruto crouched outside in the rain, soaked to the bone, and watched two masked figures exchange a sealed scroll, marked only by a black ink stripe. A pulse of red chakra stirred under Naruto's skin as fear sharpened. Kurama growled in the back of his mind, amused by the child trying to spy on wolves. Naruto forced the chakra down until his stomach cramped. That night, he met Sasuke under the bridge, where water slapped against stone pillars. Naruto's wet clothes clung to him, and Sasuke's sleeve was torn from training. Between them lay the first real evidence, a stolen scrap of root movement code. Sasuke recognized the timing. Shisui would be targeted soon. His breath turned shallow, and his Sharingan flickered unwillingly in the darkness, one tomoe spinning before fading. Naruto grabbed his wrist before panic became action. They agreed to move adults, not fight the ambush themselves. Sasuke would force Itachi close to Shisui. Naruto would trigger Hiruzen's suspicion through another route. If Danzo acted, he would find witnesses waiting. The plan nearly failed before it began. A route watcher noticed Naruto near the Hokage Tower and followed him across two rooftops. Naruto sensed the presence too late, a cold pressure behind him like a kunai between the shoulders. He ducked into a laundry yard, knocking over a basket of white sheets. Cloth exploded around him in the wind. The masked agent landed silently among the hanging fabric, blade low, eyes hidden behind porcelain. Naruto's body moved before his fear caught up. He threw a handful of wet cloth into the agent's face, slipped under the blade, and slammed a knee into the man's shin with all the strength his small body had. The agent barely staggered. Naruto hit the ground hard, rolled under a clothesline, and formed the clone seal with shaking fingers. Smoke burst around him, producing two unstable copies that sprinted in opposite directions. The root agent cut through one clone instantly. The second leapt through a sheet and dissolved into smoke against a wall. Naruto used the heartbeat of confusion to crawl beneath the porch and hold his breath in the dust. The agent stood above him, sandals inches from Naruto's face. Rainwater dripped from the porch edge. Naruto's hand covered his own mouth so tightly his nails dug into his cheek, while Kurama's chakra clawed at the seal. A dog barked somewhere nearby. Civilians shouted about stolen laundry. The root agent withdrew, unwilling to reveal himself over a suspected child. Naruto remained under the porch until his lungs burned and the footsteps vanished. When he finally crawled out, mud streaked his face and arms. He looked like the prankster the village expected, but his eyes were flat with the knowledge that Danzo had already begun watching him. Sasuke's part was quieter and more dangerous. He left a message where only Itachi would find it, a child's practice sheet with a crow drawn in black ink, one eye scratched out, and a location hidden in the pattern of mistakes. Itachi found it before dawn. He stood at his desk for a long time, the paper held between two fingers. Outside, the Uchiha district still slept, lanterns dim behind wooden screens, unaware that its fate had shifted by a child's hand. Shisui received Itachi's warning with a smile that faded as the details unfolded. He looked toward the trees beyond the training field, where leaves moved without wind. His fingers brushed the hilt of his short blade. Hiruzen's Anbu moved separately, slow enough to avoid alerting Danzo too early. Their masks passed through the morning mist across rooftops, while the Hokage sat alone in his office with a sealed order resting beneath his palm. Danzo waited in the forest outside the village, cane planted in damp earth, bandaged eye hidden beneath shadow. Around him, root agents stood without names, each one still, as a weapon placed carefully on a table. Shisui entered the clearing alone, or seemed to. His expression held the calm of a man already used to sacrificing pieces of himself. Danzo greeted him with courtesy sharp enough to draw blood. Leaves circled between them. Danzo accused Shisui's eye of being too dangerous to remain free, and Shisui answered through measured restraint. Hidden above, Itachi watched from a branch, his hand tight around a kunai. The first strike came fast. Root agents emerged from the trees, chains flashing. Shisui vanished in a blur of body flicker, but poison needles cut through his sleeve, and one grazed his arm before he reappeared near the stream. Danzo moved with surprising speed for an old man. His cane split open, revealing steel. He drove Shisui toward the water, while two root agents sealed escape routes with tags pressed against tree trunks. Shisui's Sharingan spun. The forest seemed to fold around him, as afterimages scattered across the clearing. One root agent struck empty air and collapsed when Shisui's blade tapped the base of his skull. Then, Danzo revealed the trap. A seal flared beneath Shisui's feet, black lines crawling over wet earth. His movements stuttered for a single breath, and Danzo's hand shot toward his right eye like a vulture's beak. Itachi dropped from the branches before the fingers reached their mark. His kunai struck Danzo's wrist guard with a metallic crack. The clearing erupted as root agents turned upward, and crows burst from the tree line in a black storm. Shisui tore free of the seal, but the poison slowed him. Danzo's blade cut across his face, and blood splashed over one cheek. For one terrible second, Sasuke's future memory tried to overwrite the present. Hiruzen's Anbu arrived like shadows breaking formation. Steel rang through the forest. Root agents moved with dead discipline, but surprise had turned against them, and the clearing filled with smoke, crows, and falling leaves. Naruto watched from far behind a mossy boulder, where he should never have been. His knees shook from the run. He could see only flashes. Itachi's blade, Shisui's blood, Danzo's bandaged arm, Hiruzen's Anbu masks cutting through smoke. A root agent broke away from the fight and spotted him. Naruto froze as the masked face turned. The agent rushed forward, kunai raised, and fear punched red heat through Naruto's stomach. Kurama's chakras surged before Naruto could stop it. Red light burned across his skin, thin as a veil, but wild enough to crack the mud beneath his sandals. Naruto threw one punch, clumsy and desperate. The blow did not defeat the agent. It knocked him back only a step, but the chakra burned through the man's sleeve and exposed a root seal on his wrist. The agent hesitated, suddenly aware that the Jinchuriki was involved. That hesitation saved Naruto. An Anbu landed between them and drove the root agent away with a short blade. Naruto fell to one knee, gasping, while red chakra evaporated from his arm like steam from hot iron. Across the clearing, Hiruzen appeared in full Hokage robes, staff in hand and face carved with grief. Danzo's expression shifted for the first time. The old friends stood among broken branches and fallen agents, separated by the price of silence. Danzo did not beg. He argued through blood and dust that everything had been done for the village. Hiruzen listened with eyes that looked older than the trees. His staff lowered only slightly, but the Anbu around Danzo tightened their circle. Shisui leaned against Itachi, one eye bloodshot, but still his own. Itachi's sleeve was soaked red where he supported him. The sight rooted Sasuke in place at the edge of the clearing, hidden behind a tree, unable to move. Sasuke had followed despite every warning. He saw Shisui alive. He saw Itachi with no blood of the clan on his hands. His fingers dug into bark until splinters slid under his nails. Danzo was taken under guard before noon. Root agents vanished into custody, death, or deeper shadow. The forest looked ordinary again by afternoon, except for blood in the grass and the scorch mark where Naruto's chakra had flared. Hiruzen found Naruto near the boulder, pale and shivering. The Hokage's gaze fell to the burn marks on the child's arm, then to the mud on his knees. Naruto lowered his head, pretending exhaustion could explain everything. Hiruzen did not accuse him. He removed his cloak and placed it around Naruto's shoulders. The gesture was gentle, but his eyes held questions that Naruto could not survive answering yet. In the Uchiha district, Itachi carried Shisui through a side entrance, while Fugaku waited with controlled alarm. Mikoto covered her mouth at the blood on Shisui's face, and Sasuke stood behind her, white-knuckled and silent. The clan elders arrived before sunset, anger following them like a storm. They demanded to know why Danzo had attacked one of their strongest. Fugaku listened, shoulders rigid, while Itachi laid the facts out with restrained precision. For years, suspicion had pressed the Uchiha into a corner. Now proof sat wounded in their own compound. The room grew hot with rage, and younger clan members reached for weapons before Fugaku raised one hand. Sasuke watched his father struggle against the pull of revenge. In the old future, Fugaku had walked toward revolt because he saw no other door. Now another door existed, narrow and surrounded by knives. Shisui opened his remaining strength and spoke from a mat beside the wall. He urged the clan to use proof instead of blood, to force negotiation, while the village still had reason to fear its own shame. Itachi stood behind him, face unreadable. Sasuke could see the exhaustion under his brother's eyes. The path of massacre had vanished, but another burden had taken its place, keeping angry survivors from choosing a different disaster. Naruto spent the night feverish in his apartment. The red chakra had left burns across his arm like claw marks under the skin. He wrapped them badly with old bandages and sat by the window, watching lanterns glow across the village. Kurima's voice rumbled inside him, quieter than before. The fox mocked his weakness, but the words lacked their old certainty. Naruto touched the seal on his stomach and felt something there watching, suspicious and unwillingly curious. By morning, rumors had already begun. Villagers whispered about Anbu movements, a closed forest road, and an injured Uchiha. No one knew the whole truth, but the village felt the pressure change like air before a storm. Hiruzen summoned Fugaku, Itachi, Shisui, and the elders under the cover of official security talks. The meeting room in the Hokage Tower was dim, guarded, and heavy with decades of distrust. Fugaku arrived in formal robes, his face stern enough to hide sleeplessness. Shisui walked beside him with bandages across one eye and cheek. Itachi followed behind, young and composed, carrying more guilt than any teenager should. Danzo was absent, locked behind seals and political caution. His empty place in the village power structure felt almost louder than his presence. Homura and Koharu sat stiffly, aware that the ground beneath them had shifted. Hiruzen admitted enough to prevent war, but not enough to destroy the village's faith overnight. The compromise tasted bitter. Danzo would be stripped of command. Root would be dissolved. A formal investigation would begin under secrecy. Fugaku demanded more. His hand struck the table hard enough to rattle inkstones. He wanted acknowledgement of the Uchiha surveillance, the isolation, the insult of being treated as suspects after defending the same walls. Shisui spoke next, voice rough but steady. He proposed reforms to the police force, mixed patrols, shared command reviews, and a gradual return of Uchiha families into central village districts. Itachi remained silent until the room began to fracture. Then he described the forest ambush in detail, each sentence precise enough to cut away excuses. When he finished, even Hiruzen looked at the table instead of his face. Outside the tower, Naruto sat on a rooftop with his bandaged arm hidden under his sleeve. He watched birds circle the Hokage monument and wondered whether this was how history changed. Not with victory, but with adults swallowing truths they hated. Sasuke climbed onto the roof beside him, breathing harder than he wanted to show. He looked toward the Uchiha district, where smoke rose gently from breakfast fires. For once, the sight did not turn into memory. Naruto noticed the splinters still lodged under Sasuke's nails. Sasuke noticed the burns beneath Naruto's sleeve. Neither commented. Their injuries were small compared to what they had prevented, yet both boys held their hands carefully. They remained on the rooftop until clouds moved over the sun. Naruto told Sasuke that Danzo surviving would become a problem. Sasuke agreed, but his gaze stayed on the living district below, where children of his clan crossed the street, carrying school bags. For several days, the village balanced on a blade. Uchiha patrols changed routes. Anbu shadows appeared near council buildings. Root safe houses were raided, and some were found empty, cleaned out before dawn. Danzo's influence did not vanish with his arrest. Scrolls disappeared. Agents failed to report. Hidden seals burned themselves out in abandoned rooms. Every missing piece proved that the old man had built roots deeper than anyone wanted to admit. Hiruzen visited Naruto once during that week. He found the boy sitting beside a stack of unopened ramen cups, trying to write with his injured arm. The Hokage's gaze lingered on the bandage, but he asked about school instead. Naruto answered like a child would, careless and evasive. Hiruzen listened like a shinobi would, hearing the shape of every lie. When he left, he placed a proper meal on the table and paused at the door longer than usual. Iruka also changed. He called Naruto back after class, pretending to correct his work while watching the boy's hands. Naruto kept his grin crooked and loud, but his fingers tightened whenever anyone mentioned the forest. Sakura noticed things she could not name. Sasuke no longer basked in admiration. Naruto no longer chased attention with the same hungry eyes. When both boys looked toward the Hokage Tower, their faces carried the same guarded shadow. Hinata saw Naruto's bandaged arm during training and turned pale. She approached with a small packet of ointment, holding it out without meeting his eyes. Naruto accepted it gently, and her shoulders loosened when he smiled, without forcing it. That evening, Naruto applied the ointment in his apartment and stared at the careful Hyuga wrapping. The kindness was quiet, almost hidden, but it warmed the room more than the weak lamp beside his bed. Sasuke's home became both sanctuary and battlefield. Mikoto watched him at meals, sensing the distance in her youngest son. Fugaku spoke less, but his eyes followed Sasuke, as if trying to understand a stranger living behind a child's face. Itachi began training Sasuke differently. Their sessions were no longer simple brotherly demonstrations. Itachi tested memory, timing, and emotional control, placing Sasuke under light genjutsu and watching how quickly he broke the pattern. Sasuke failed often. His old mind knew the exits, but his young chakra faltered. Each failure left him sweating on the training ground, fists pressed into dirt, while Itachi weighed in without mockery. One night, Itachi sat beside Sasuke under the veranda, while rain traced lines down the garden stones. He told Sasuke, indirectly and carefully, that fear could protect people or cage them. Sasuke stared at the wet grass and understood the warning. Naruto and Sasuke's secret became harder to hide as the days passed. Their knowledge leaked through reactions, glances, and the way they moved before danger appeared. Kakashi noticed them once from a distant rooftop and remembered Minato's eyes. Kakashi did not approach. He watched Naruto leave the academy with Iruka's lunch bundle in hand, then watched Sasuke turn down a street that led toward the river. The two boys never looked back, but both adjusted their pace, as if aware of being followed. At the river, Naruto tried walking on water too early. He managed 3 steps before his chakra surged unevenly and launched him face first into the current. Sasuke dragged him out by the collar, soaked and irritated. Naruto spat river water and laughed despite the bruises. Sasuke scolded him through a tight expression, but his hands checked Naruto's wrist for injury before he realized what he was doing. The old rivalry had softened into something more guarded. Sasuke tried a fire technique next. The signs came perfectly. The chakra did not. A small flame coughed from his mouth, followed by smoke and a harsh fit of coughing that bent him double. Naruto slapped his back until Sasuke shoved him away. They glared at each other, drenched and muddy. Then both looked toward the village walls, where the future waited without a map. The first victory did not bring peace. It brought attention. Obito stood miles away in a ruined shrine, half his face hidden by a spiral mask, while a white Zetsu rose from the floor with news of Danzo's failure. The report was impossible in small ways. Shizui alive, Danzo exposed too early, Itachi still inside Konoha, Sasuke untouched by massacre. Obito listened without moving, but the air inside the shrine tightened. Black Zetsu emerged from the wall like ink given hunger. He said the flow had shifted around two children. Obito's visible eye narrowed. Somewhere beneath the mask, an old wound remembered the name Uchiha with hatred and grief. In Konoha, the Uchiha district opened its gates for the first mixed patrol. Uchiha police walked beside non-clan shinobi under suspicious eyes. Civilians watched from doorways, uncertain whether they were seeing reform or the beginning of another conflict. Fugaku stood at the main street with Shisui beside him. Hiruzen's representatives arrived under Anbu guard. The handshake that followed was stiff, public, and filmed in memory by every watching Uchiha child. Sasuke watched from behind Mikoto's sleeve. His father's hand clasped the hand of a village that had almost ordered their graves. The sight should have satisfied him, but unease coiled behind his ribs. Naruto watched from a rooftop across the street, hiding among chimney shadows. His bandaged arm rested against his knee. Below, people whispered as Uchiha and village shinobi began walking the same road without drawing blades. For a moment, the massacre existed only in memory. The streets below remained clean. Lamps swayed in the afternoon wind. A child with the Uchiha crest chased a ball past a startled civilian, and no one screamed. Then Naruto saw a crow land on a power line, its dark eye fixed on him. Itachi stood in the street below, also looking up. Their gazes met across the distance, and Naruto knew the older boy had started connecting pieces. Itachi did not expose him. He gave the faintest nod, almost invisible, then turned back to Shisui. Naruto exhaled slowly, realizing that the secret was no longer held only by two children. That night, Sasuke found Naruto at the old swing near the academy. The seat creaked under Naruto's small weight, and the empty yard stretched around him in pale moonlight. For once, no villagers were there to glare. Sasuke stood beside the swing without sitting. He told Naruto, indirectly, that Itachi knew something was wrong. Naruto looked down at the dirt beneath his sandals and dragged one foot through it, drawing a broken spiral. They considered telling Itachi more. The temptation was sharp. A living Itachi could help them prepare for Akatsuki, Obito, Madara, everything beyond the village walls. But too much truth could crush him or turn him into a target. Naruto remembered Itachi's crow, the genjutsu hidden for Sasuke, the sickness he had carried alone. Sasuke remembered the blade, the lie, the brother who had chosen hell because adults gave him no third road. In the end, they decided on fragments, enough to save lives, enough to guide choices. The whole future remained too heavy to hand to anyone who still had to live inside it. The next morning, Naruto returned to the academy and deliberately failed a basic clone exercise. Smoke puffed around him, producing a sagging copy with crossed eyes. The class laughed, and Iruka rubbed his forehead with familiar despair. Sasuke watched from the back row, unimpressed but relieved. Naruto had chosen the mask again. The village still needed to believe he was merely difficult, while the real work continued beneath the noise. Sakura did not laugh for long. She noticed Naruto's clone had formed for half a second, with perfect balance, before collapsing. Her eyes narrowed over her notebook, and for the first time, curiosity began to replace childish annoyance. Training continued in stolen hours. Naruto learned to produce 2 stable shadow clones for less than a minute, each attempt leaving him pale and hungry. Sasuke maintained 1 Tomoe Sharingan for longer, though headaches followed him into sleep. They mapped future threats on paper and burned each sheet afterward. Akatsuki names became ashes in the river. Orochimaru's mark became a smear of black ink under Sasuke's thumb. Danzo's name burned last and slowest. Kurama watched from behind the seal as Naruto trained until his small hands blistered. The fox mocked him less often now. Sometimes when Naruto collapsed from exhaustion, a thread of red chakra steadied his breathing before vanishing. Naruto never thanked him aloud. Kurama never admitted the gesture. Their truce lived in the silence between pain and recovery, fragile as a candle sheltered from wind by two unwilling hands. Sasuke began dreaming of the old massacre less often, but the dreams that remained changed shape. Instead of finding corpses, he saw living clan members turning toward him with empty eyes, asking what price he had paid to keep them breathing. He woke from those dreams before dawn and trained until sunrise. Mikoto found him once with bleeding knuckles, striking a wooden post far beyond reason. She caught his hands, wrapped them carefully, and held them until the shaking stopped. Fugaku saw the bandages at breakfast. He said nothing in front of the family, but later brought Sasuke to the training yard. The lesson was simple, brutal, and quiet. A leader's hands could not afford to break before the battle began. Sasuke listened with sweat running down his neck. His father's words carried pride, warning, and a trust Sasuke had once spent years craving. This time, the approval hurt because it came from a man he had already buried in memory. The final crisis of the arc began with a missing root archive. Anbu found a safe house beneath an abandoned clinic, its shelves stripped and seals burned from the inside. One wall carried a fresh mark carved into plaster, a root splitting into 3 branches. Hiruzen understood the message. Danzo was contained, but his people were not finished. Some had chosen to obey the village. Others had chosen the idea of Danzo over the man himself. Among the stolen files were records on Jinchuriki containment, Uchiha surveillance, and old experiments involving Hashirama's cells. Hiruzen stood in the empty archive with his pipe unlit between his fingers, looking suddenly colder. Naruto learned of the theft from overheard Anbu movement and one careless comment near the academy gate. The word Hashirama struck him like a kunai. He found Sasuke before sunset, and both boys felt the future shift again. They could not chase root remnants alone. They could only prepare. Naruto reinforced his control exercises. Sasuke memorized every symbol from the carved mark. Together they passed a hint toward Itachi for a childish drawing left near the river. Itachi received the message and did not smile. That evening, he stood with Shisui on a rooftop overlooking the village. Below them, lanterns glowed in homes that had nearly become funeral lights. Shisui asked, without saying the words directly, whether Sasuke was the source of the warnings. Itachi's silence answered enough. Wind moved through their hair, and both young men looked toward the academy district. The decision formed there. They would protect the children without forcing the truth from them. If Naruto and Sasuke carried a secret heavy enough to bend history, ripping it open might wound the village worse. Days later, Hiruzen called a private assembly with Fugaku, Shisui, Itachi, and select Anbu. New reforms were written in careful ink. Uchiha patrols would expand. Root remnants would be hunted. Naruto's monitoring would change from containment to protection. The paper did not heal old wounds, but it changed who held the knife. For the first time, the village's hidden machinery turned against the shadows that had once owned it. Naruto stood outside the Hokage Tower as the agreement was sealed above him. He could not hear the words, but he saw the Uchiha crest pass through the doors without chains or blood. His fingers loosened around the strap of his goggles. Sasuke stood across the street, half hidden behind a pole. He looked at Naruto, then toward the tower, then toward the far rooftops, where Kakashi's silhouette vanished before either child could confront him. The sun went down over Konoha in gold and red. Families lit lamps. The Uchiha district remained noisy with ordinary life. Naruto walked home through streets where some villagers still avoided his gaze, but fewer stepped away as sharply. At his apartment, a proper meal waited outside the door, wrapped in cloth. No note. Naruto crouched and touched the warm container with 2 fingers, recognizing Iruka's careful knots in the wrapping. He ate by the window, slowly, while the village settled into night. The room still looked shabby, and the silence still pressed against the walls, but the meal filled the air with steam instead of loneliness. Inside the seal, Kurama rested with one eye open. Naruto felt the fox watching the memory of the day. Shisui alive, Itachi unstained, Sasuke's clan breathing under lantern light. The fox said nothing, but his chakra no longer pressed like a threat. Across the village, Sasuke sat with his family at dinner. Mikoto poured tea. Fugaku discussed patrol reforms. Itachi listened with lowered eyes. The table was ordinary enough to hurt, and Sasuke held his chopsticks carefully to hide his trembling fingers. Later, Sasuke stepped outside alone. The Uchiha streets were quiet, washed silver by moonlight. He walked the path that had once led him through corpses and found only closed doors, sleeping homes, and the distant chirp of insects. At the end of the street, Itachi waited beneath a lantern. He did not ask for the full truth. He only placed a hand on Sasuke's head, gentle and heavy, and let the silence acknowledge what had almost happened. Sasuke leaned into the touch for one breath before stepping back. The child in him wanted to stay there. The man in him knew the war had only changed shape. Beyond Konoha's walls, Obito watched the village through a spiral of space, his masked face hidden among twisted branches. The Uchiha district glowed alive in the distance, a wound that had refused to open. Black Zetsu slid from the tree beside him, voice low and patient. He suggested that the two children were no longer variables to observe, but threats to remove. Obito's visible eye fixed on the distant lights of Naruto's apartment. The space around Obito bent inward. He vanished without a sound, leaving only a spiral distortion in the night air. Black Zetsu sank back into the earth, carrying the first true alarm of a future that had begun to resist. On the academy roof, Naruto and Sasuke met before dawn. The village below was quiet, wrapped in blue mist. Neither boy celebrated. Their first victory had saved a clan, but it had also warned the enemies hiding beyond the map. Naruto's bandaged arm rested beside Sasuke's splintered fingers on the roof tiles. They looked small, fragile, almost ridiculous against the weight of what they remembered. Yet beneath them, Konoha breathed through another morning. Sasuke studied the sunrise over the Hokage monument and understood that revenge had lost its throne inside him. In its place stood something colder and harder to escape: responsibility for every life his knowledge had spared. Naruto watched the same light touch the village gates. Somewhere out there waited Orochimaru, Akatsuki, Obito, Madara, and the buried will of a goddess. The old road was gone, and the new one had no signs. When the academy bell rang below, children began spilling into the yard, laughing under the pale morning sun. Naruto and Sasuke climbed down from the roof and walked toward class, carrying the first broken piece of fate between them.